Great. So thank you to everybody for joining us, our latest session in our ongoing Clean Heat Standard stakeholder sessions. This is a technical session on non-residential crediting. I want to thank everybody for joining us today and also for your ongoing input on the Clean Heat Standard. My name is Will Space. I'm Senior Technical Advisor for Climate Programs at MassDEP. Presenters with me today, primary presenters are going to be Angela Parnay and Emily Lamb on the subject matter. I also have with me today Joshua Cook, who's with us, and also Seth Federspiel from the Department of Energy Resources. We appreciate him taking the time to join. And then also, I believe, Assistant Commissioner Christine Kirby will be at least listening in on the session today. So thank you to everybody for joining. Next slide.
I'll just go over a couple Zoom logistics quickly. As we mentioned, the meeting's being recorded, and to minimize background noise, everyone is on mute. We'd ask that you stay that way during the presentation. And then if you need to rename yourself, we'd ask that you put in your full name and affiliation, and you can do that by clicking on the participants icon at the bottom of your screen, and then to the right of your name, there's an option to rename. And then on the next slide, we'll talk about how to participate in the meeting. So the latter half of the meeting will be focused on answering questions and then hearing your comments and feedback. So if you'd like to speak or provide a comment, you can raise your hand by using the raise your hand function in the participants panel. And when it's your turn, we'll notify you by chat and then announce your name and ask you to unmute yourself. You can also put questions and comments in the chat function, although we'd ask that you wait to do that until we're done with the presentation. Just helps us run the meeting a little more smoothly. So with that, I'll hand it back to Will.
Great. Thanks, Emily. So just outline of the meeting. So we're working now through the meeting logistics and updates. We'll have a presentation about 20 minutes, and then we'll allow some time at the end for questions and comments from participants. Next slide. So just starting to look at the background here, just as a reminder for people, the Clean Heat Standard has been something we've been working on, kind of got its first hearing and airing in some reports that were issued in 2022, including a couple of iterations of the state's Clean Energy and Climate Plan, and also a Clean Heat Commission report. In 2023, last year, we went through, we initiated and are still working through a open stakeholder process. What we do before we propose any regulations, we seek informal input from stakeholders. So that included, you may remember, a discussion document and some different rounds of comment on aspects of that, and also a draft framework and a round of comments that concluded in December. Next slide, and I think we're back to Emily for this one. Oh, sorry.
So we'll provide a brief reminder of what a Clean Heat Standard is before moving into the content for today. The Clean Heat Standard would be a regulatory program from DEP that would require different suppliers of heating energy, like heating oil, propane, natural gas, and electricity, to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions over time. These suppliers would generate or purchase clean heat credits to demonstrate compliance with the standard. The draft framework, which we released last November, lays out key concepts for the program. It describes how the standards for electrification and greenhouse gas emission reductions could be set, which suppliers could be regulated, how credits could be generated, and the different ways heating energy suppliers could have flexibility in how they comply, as well as how revenue produced through the program could be used to support equitable outcomes. We also recently released a discussion document describing credit generation for non-residential buildings, which is what we'll be talking about more here today. For about a year now, we've been holding meetings like this one as part of that informal stakeholder process that Will mentioned. And this meeting today is a technical session where we'll be discussing how to credit non-residential buildings. And like the other technical sessions, we'll be diving into some of the more technical program mechanisms. This will be the last technical session that we have planned for this part of the informal stakeholder process. We also have held regular virtual community meetings, which are more geared towards a general audience, and we'll be holding a virtual community meeting this Thursday, which will be dedicated time for us to hear oral questions and comments. You can also send any questions and comments to us at climate.strategies@mass.gov. As a reminder, as we wind down this informal process, please send us any additional written comments by April 5th. And as we've mentioned before, we recently revamped our website earlier this year, and we now have a Clean Heat Standard landing page, which links to all of our resources and highlights details about the draft framework. Earlier this month, we uploaded several new documents, which includes an updated FAQ document, which we also uploaded. We uploaded a new version again today, and we also added a discussion document on the non-residential crediting, which is today's subject matter, and the comments received between September 2nd and February 9th, as well as a summary of themes from those comments. I will return it to Will, who will go through next steps.
Great, thank you, Angela. So this is kind of more where we are now on our Clean Heat Standard program development timeline. We've, as people are aware, recently finished up winter, and that involved one of our milestones, which is proposing the reporting regulations for the clean heat suppliers that will underlie the compliance obligation for the fuel suppliers. And then we also released the discussion document we're looking at today, and also had another comment deadline on our early registration program for electrification projects. We're now in spring, and we're working toward, I'll talk about this a little more on the next slide, but we have a kind of a wrapping up of our informal stakeholder process, working toward the goal of finalizing those fuel supplier emissions reporting regulations later this year, and also proposing comprehensive clean heat standard regulations. And just to be clear, this is an informal stakeholder process now to help us come up with what would be included in that proposal, but that proposal later this year would be subject to another round of comment through our rulemaking process before we have final regulations. Next slide. So just to kind of orient you where we are in our stakeholder process, we're just as we have for a year or so now, we're happy to accept comments on any aspect of the clean heat standard, but right now we're focused, particularly in this meeting, on the non-residential crediting aspect of it, which we haven't said too much before. So we have this session going on right now, and then also a virtual community meeting on Thursday in advance of what we're calling a final comment deadline. Doesn't mean you can't send us things after that, but we are going to start, trying to take stock of what we've heard and think about next steps after that deadline. And so if you can get us what you have by that deadline, it's very helpful. The meeting on Thursday evening, we're not planning to share any new material on that. And we're generally not focused on taking questions at that meeting also. It's more like one of our hearings that we have for regulations. The purpose being, if there's people that prefer to tell us their input in writing, or rather orally versus in writing, that you can come to that evening session and tell us what you have to say in that way. And I'd also emphasize what's at the bottom of this slide. When we say this is a final deadline, we don't need to receive prior comments or any things we've heard before, unless people's perspective has changed and you want to tell us that. We're just kind of trying to, we know it's helpful for people to have a deadline, and we're saying if you have things we haven't heard yet, we'd like to get them by this Friday. That's kind of where we are in the process. We'll move on then back to Emily for the next part of the presentation.
Sorry. I'll start us off by giving some context for how non-residential crediting would work relative to the framework. In the framework, we describe two different types of credits. The first is full electrification credits, which would be produced by converting homes to electric heat pumps. And then second, we have emission reduction credits, which would be produced by using that clean heat. And this could mean running a heat pump or delivering qualified biofuels for residential heating. And when we talk about non-residential crediting, we're referring to buildings used for commercial or industrial purposes. And these non-residential buildings could earn emission reduction credits based on the emission reductions that they make following the demonstrated implementation of clean heat. The crediting of these emissions, we envision would be consistent with the methods used by DOER in their forthcoming building energy reporting program, or DEP's greenhouse gas emission reporting regulation for facilities. I will pass it on to Emily to give us a brief overview of specific ways non-residential buildings can generate credits.
Great. Yeah, so as Angela mentioned, the framework laid out not very much detail about how we would do emissions reduction crediting for non-residential buildings. So we published a discussion document earlier this year that provides more of our thinking about how we would do this under the Clean Heat Standard. And there's two main mechanisms included in that discussion document. First is electrification of heating, so credits generated by electrifying heating in commercial and industrial buildings, which I'll talk about in the next couple of slides. And then I'll turn it back to Angela to talk about potential crediting for certain clean fuels that are not delivered through the pipeline system. So for electrification, the emissions reductions credits can be generated by installing an electric heat pump for space heating and then demonstrating actual reductions in on-site emissions using data from the Building Energy Reporting Program that the Department of Energy Resources, DOER, was tasked with establishing in the 2022 Climate and Clean Energy Bill. So that bill requires DOER to establish a building energy reporting program that would have annual reporting of building energy usage for buildings that are greater than 20,000 square feet. And so our thinking is that the emissions reductions crediting for the Clean Heat Standard would use the information gathered in that program to determine emissions reductions credits, and that smaller buildings would have the opportunity to voluntarily report the same information to receive emissions reductions in the Clean Heat Standard. So in the next slide, I'll talk about some key topics for how we would determine how many emissions reductions credits a given building gets under the Clean Heat Standard. So first I'll talk through what the topics are, and then I'll describe the approach that we've set out very simply in the discussion document. So first, to quantify emissions reductions, you need to set a baseline. So what are you reducing emissions compared to? And there are conceptually two ways that you can set a baseline. You can either use a measured baseline that's based on historic data of past emissions from a building, or you could use modeled estimates of emissions from a building based on sort of building characteristics and energy use. And there's a variety of existing tools that do these types of estimates. You also need to account for weather normalization, because the emissions from heating vary each year quite substantially. It could be based on the weather. So if we are generating emissions reductions credits based on the actual reported emissions from a building, we need to be able to account for the fact that that is going to vary year over year with the different weather. And then finally, measure verification. So MassDEP will need to determine what procedures are appropriate for how we would verify that an electric heating equipment has actually been installed at a non-residential building to allow it to be eligible to generate emissions reductions credits from electrification. So the concept in the discussion document that we put out is a simplified approach where after a building has installed an electric space heating equipment, we would use a historic baseline, so actual emissions from that building from before the installation of the electric heating, and compare that to the reported emissions for the subsequent years. And we would weather normalize the emissions based on a simplified approach of using the heating degree days from the year that was used to establish the baseline compared to the year for which the credits were being issued. So that's the high level approach of how we would actually calculate how many emissions reductions credits would come from a given building. And I'll just note what's at the bottom of the slide here, that this approach, you would need to electrify the space heating of the building to be eligible to generate the emissions reductions credits. but the way we've described how the actual number of credits that a building would get would be calculated means that you'd get credit for all emissions reductions realized on site, including those from weatherization measures or electrification of water heating. So for example, if you weatherized the same year that you put in an electric heat pump, you would get emissions reductions credits for the full amount of reductions of emissions that you did that were achieved because of those interventions. I think with that, I'll hand it over to Angela to talk about fuels.
Thanks. So as Emily mentioned, MassDEP is considering allowing crediting for certain non-pipeline clean fuels. Such fuels could include renewable natural gas or hydrogen that is produced using renewable electricity, as long as they are not blended with fossil fuels. This approach to crediting could use the data that Emily just described from the forthcoming Building Energy Reporting Program from DOER. In that situation, the credits would be earned by the building owner, not the supplier of fuel. Also to mention that note at the bottom, fuel suppliers would be able to earn emission reduction credits by delivering eligible liquid biofuels to non-residential customers as well as residential, the way we described in the framework. I will hand it back to Emily.
Great, thanks. So the discussion document that we put out included a set of questions for stakeholder consideration, areas that we're particularly interested in stakeholder feedback on and to sort of help foster discussion about this concept. They're broken out here into categories, so I'm just going to read through them before we open things up to stakeholder questions and comments. So first, on existing programs, how should MassDEP leverage existing policies, programs, and measurement methodologies for non-residential emissions reductions? And some examples of this include Energy Star Portfolio Manager, the MassSave energy efficiency programs for commercial and industrial customers, local building performance standards, or the 10 community fossil-free pilot. Also ask questions about the baseline. So should crediting rely on a modeled emissions baseline instead of a measured baseline like what we just described earlier? And then if we use a historic baseline, should the baseline year for crediting be the year immediately before the Clean Heat project is completed or an earlier year such as 2024 or 2025? Then on special accommodations or administrative support, wondering if there are certain types of buildings or thermal loads that would need special accommodations or administrative support. Some examples might be small buildings, schools, or mixed-use buildings. And then finally, on the topic of emissions reductions themselves, are there additional commercial and industrial emissions reduction measures that we should consider crediting? And then also, should there be some minimum level of emission reduction that's required? For example, 75% from baseline or 5 metric tons to be able to generate emissions reductions credits. So I think that's the end of the presentation we have, and we can leave these questions up here for a few minutes, but now I think we'll open it up to questions and comments from stakeholders.
Ben Butterworth, in the non-residential building weatherization and water heating example, you mentioned multiple building improvements occurring in the same year. What if, for example, a building electrified their heating system in 2026, weatherized in 2027, and electrified water heating in 2028? How would you handle that from a credit generating perspective?
So I think in the concept that we've put in the discussion document, once a building was eligible to generate emissions reductions credits from weatherization, or sorry, not from weatherization, from electrification, it would generate credits each year based on the emissions reported. So it would receive fewer emissions reductions credits when it had only electrified its electric heating system conceptually, and then as it did more and more emissions reducing measures, it would get a larger volume of emissions reductions credits each year because the reduction of emissions compared to the baseline would be increasing.
As a reminder for folks, you can use the raise hand function and you'll be asked to unmute to ask your question. Kathy Christophson, how do you envision hydrogen delivery if not via pipeline?
I think we don't have a specific technology in mind. I think we're trying to acknowledge that there are specific commercial and industrial uses where electrification might not be viable. And so we're leaving open, the potential that there is a need for allowing those types of alternative fuels in these uses. I don't know, Will, if you have anything you want to add.
Well, I could only add that if it's delivered through the pipeline, I think in any foreseeable future, it's going to be blended with fossil fuels. And so we're trying to focus on cases where you go completely to a clean fuel in this particular proposal, although this is, as you know, out for comment. So we're happy to hear comments on that topic also.
Amanda Sachs, how are stakeholder comments considered in program design?
We're considering all of the stakeholder comments that we've received so far and continue to receive. It's really helpful to us to hear, what everyone has to say and considers about this program. I think maybe I'd turn it back to Will if he has more to add.
Oh, I agree.
Eve Torrey, I've asked you to unmute.
Hi, thank you. I just want to be clear that this is still only for energy suppliers and how energy suppliers can gain credits, correct? Because it's involving potentially a lot of work on behalf of buildings.
So for this concept for the electrification credits and the everything other than liquid biofuels, it would be the building owner that would be the entity that would sort of have default ownership of the credits. So the building owner would be receiving the credits for the emissions reductions, and the heating energy suppliers would be the obligated entities, so the people that needed to hold the credits.
I'm sorry, you're going in and out of it.
I can just add, so the buildings would not be a regulated entity under this, so there wouldn't be any obligations. But if the building wanted to do a clean heat project, then they could apply for these credits. And the DOER reporting that's coming online, we think will make that a much more streamlined process than it would otherwise be.
Yeah, so that was sort of some of my confusion. Is in one of the other slides, it was that the building would get the credit, but I thought the whole idea of this was that the regulators were the ones that needed the credit. So why would buildings be going after credits for something that a regulator needs? Am I misunderstanding that?
No, I think the idea is that the buildings could sell the credits or the rights to the credits to the regulated entities.
Okay. Although the building won't be regulated, however, but they can sell credits to the supplier who is regulated.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll just add that I think the concept that's most similar is this solar rooftop sort of situation where there's no obligation for a building to do that, but if it does, it may be able to get some value from the credits that need to be used for compliance by other entities.
Zach Bloom, I've asked you to unmute.
Thanks. I guess following up on that topic there, the solar, would clean heat certificates be treated like a REC or renewable energy credit, i.e. does it contain an environmental claim where if someone sells it, they don't get that environmental claim, or does a certificate under clean heat not contain any environmental claim reductions.
I'm not entirely sure what environmental claim reduction means, but the clean heat credits would be created and managed in a, a unique IT system that MassDEP builds, and they would, not be able to be transacted outside of that system.
I can add, I don't think we're considering an attribute concept like in the solar rooftop example. If you've sold off the RECs to the system on your rooftop, then you may not be able to claim that you're using solar power at that site. We're not envisioning a similar sort of a concept for clean heat certificates. They're really just more an accounting mechanism to ensure that a certain amount of clean heat comes online.
Okay, can you include that, I guess, in the language? This was an open question, I think, for alternative energy credits, and that's the way that we understood it, but it was never clarified.
Yeah, we can note that in our FAQ document is a good place for us to put those sorts of things out, so we can make a note of that to clarify.
Great, thanks, Will.
Robert Rio, I've asked you to unmute.
Yes, thank you very much for this, and thanks for all the time you put into us and your ability to take comments and your assistance. I'm confused about the reason why there is a prohibition about blending RNG and hydrogen into the existing system, or at least a proposed prohibition where it wouldn't count, I should say. It would seem like using the existing system, even if it doesn't get you to 100% electrification right away, it would still be a net benefit given the amount of RNG and hydrogen that's expected to come through over the next 5 to 7 years with all the investments. Massachusetts just got a very large investment on RNG from the federal government, and I would expect that type of investment to continue. So it seems as if this is being pushed off at a time when we really should be encouraging it in all ways possible. So I was just wondering what the reason, I know you're still accepting comments, but I was just wondering what the initial reasoning for that was.
Sure. I mean, we are still accepting comments, and I think we've also heard quite a few comments of concern about, blending these things into the existing pipelines. So there's a lot of evolving information on this, and, so I think that's part of it. I don't know, Will, if you want to add anything.
I can add, and I hope this doesn't seem evasive, Bob, but that's sort of not the topic of this meeting. This is about things where the building would get credited, and we think what you're talking about, if it was part of the program, would be more likely credited the way we're talking about crediting biofuels that are blended with the fuel supply. So we've signaled that in the 2028 program review, we would reconsider whether we should be crediting things blended in the pipelines the same way we're talking about for liquid fuels. And I think we have very much heard your, others, I don't want to attribute anything to you, but we've heard a lot of comments that 2028 maybe is later than it should be. But as you know, and as Emily mentioned, there is a real focus now on electrification versus using the pipeline system to achieve reduction. So we wanted to focus here in this particular proposal to things that might be able to be credited kind of independent of the pipeline system.
Okay, thank you.
June Wooding, how do you ensure accuracy for modeling and weather normalization? Who will be monitoring this process?
So I think first on the modeling side, the concept that we've proposed relies on historic data, so on the actual reported energy use at buildings to calculate their emissions. So we wouldn't actually be modeling emissions in what we propose, although we are asking for stakeholder feedback on whether a modeling approach is better. Weather normalization, we've also put out a very simplified concept for how we'd handle that and recognize that it's not perfect, but really we're trying capture sort of the magnitude of the differences between seasons rather than a perfectly accurate accounting system.
Sandy Beauregard, I've asked you to unmute.
Thank you. I was just wondering, it sounds like a lot of the focus is on building level work. Is there thought to, places like campuses or others that might have larger district systems? Would they just be reporting and participating in the same way as a building? Or are there any special considerations for how those types of systems might participate?
So I think that's something we're very interested in stakeholder feedback on, and also something that, we're collaborating closely with DOER on how they're thinking about that for their building energy performance. Building energy reporting program.
Eve Torrey, I've asked you to unmute.
Thank you. Another question, because a lot of buildings are under requirements of their own, whether it be Birdo or Budo, etc. So they are doing a lot of either electrification or GHG reduction projects for compliance with the building performance standard or etc. So I am assuming if they are using those, like whether they be power purchase agreements and they have RECs or GHG reduction for compliance, I'm assuming then they can't use those for credits for energy suppliers, right?
So the way that we've framed this is sort of the clean heat standard is an umbrella policy that wouldn't exclude things that were also participating in other programs. It's sort of statewide and would apply to everyone.
So, sorry, I'm not so I guess my concern is, my question is around, because you wouldn't want double counting. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. If those credits, whether they be RECs or they be electrification or they be GHG reduction, that is happening for compliance within certain, say, building performance standards within certain jurisdictions, those could not be used for, you couldn't sell those to energy suppliers for their own credits.
So I think this is similar to the attribute question that we had earlier, and it is a distinction between the clean heat standard and things like the renewable energy certificate markets, where you wouldn't be giving up the right to say you're using clean heat for another program by selling your clean heat credit. So we would be counting everything under the clean heat standard, regardless of like the other drivers behind why a building made decisions to electrify.
I'm really sorry, Emily, you're going in and out a bit. I didn't catch all of that. Apologies.
Sure, sorry. So I was just saying that it is similar to the attribute concept question that we answered earlier, where you wouldn't be giving up a clean heat credit, wouldn't sort of take away the right to use clean heat for other purposes, and we wouldn't be trying to exclude projects that had used sort of other incentives towards electrifying their heat or using clean heat. And I, like Will mentioned, it's probably a good thing to put in our FAQ.
Okay, so it could be used, in fact, for both purposes. By the way, that was much easier to hear. Whatever you just did is much better.
Okay, I don't know what I did, but hopefully it holds out.
Okay, so you can use it for both, is what you're saying.
Yes.
A credit.
Yeah, the umbrella word is sort of meant to say that we want to, it's not so much a worry about double counting, but we want to use this program to count kind of all this clean heat that's going on in the Commonwealth. So we would count it no matter of the purpose of it happening.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ben Butterworth, the current proposal is that non-residential building envelope improvements would only generate credits for hybrid heated buildings because they directly reduce on-site fossil fuel combustion, correct? In other words, weatherization improvements would not impact the level of credits generated by a fully electrically heated non-residential building.
Yes, I think that's accurate.
I'm not seeing any additional, never mind. Chris Brennan, what mechanism will DEP use to account for non-thermal fossil fuel loads used in industrial and non-residential applications? For example, how to handle propane-powered commercial laundry, FF-powered steam generation. Could you just clarify what that is, Chris? Used in industrial processes of fossil fuel, propane-powered forklifts, and others. Thank you.
So I think the question is whether we'd be separating out what end uses the fossil fuel consumed on site of a building were used towards in this crediting scheme, and the answer to that as we've envisioned it is no. But we are, accepting comment on all aspects of this. So if that's something that we should be considering, or that stakeholders feel they have a recommendation for how we should handle that, we'd be interested to hear it.
I would just add to what Emily said. I think one of the questions we're grappling at this relates to the campus question earlier. Is conceptually, I think we want to give credits to projects that really do make a transition to clean heat. But once that happened, we want to be able to measure the reduction in emissions without a complicated modeling scheme or separate metering or whatever might be needed. So one of the questions that's on the screen now is whether how should we sort of set, what has to happen before you can start getting those credits, and then once you get them, you would be credited based on the fossil fuel reductions.
Eve Torrey, can you go over what a building can sell a credit to energy suppliers for?
I think that's sort of a general question about how the clean heat standard would work conceptually. So just at a very high level, the regulated heating energy suppliers would need to hold a certain number of credits each year to meet their compliance obligations. And so one way for them to obtain those credits would be to buy them from a building owner.
While we wait for additional comments, you can raise your hand to speak, or you can put your comment in the chat and I'll read it for you.
Yeah, maybe we should go to the last slide with the contact information and comment deadline while we wait.
Great. Well, it seems like maybe one quick last call.
Amanda Sachs, comment deadline is just one of many deadlines for public comment submissions.
Well, yes, but it's the last of many deadlines in our informal stakeholder process. I think I saw another question that this might answer, which is the next step assuming we move forward with the clean heat standard, would be to have a regulatory proposal later in the year, which would have another opportunity for comment on such sort of much more detailed requirements. But we are closing up a long process this week by requesting the first, finishing up this first round of stakeholder comment by this Friday.
Eve Torrey, is there a general amount paid for a credit, e.g., a certain number of dollars per ton of greenhouse gas?
So that's not something that we would establish within the clean heat standard regulation. It would be sort of set by the market for the credits. But we do include something called an ACP, an alternative compliance payment, which functions as sort of a maximum credit price that you might expect in the market. So for the emissions reductions credits, the framework includes an ACP price of $190 per metric ton of emissions reductions. But again, that's all open for comment, and that's not necessarily what you would expect the market value for the credits to be. It's just a maximum price.
I'm not seeing any additional comments or raised hands.
Okay, well then, thank you to everybody for joining this meeting and all of our past meetings, and we look forward to your written comments later this week. Thank you.